bring the meeting to order for this agenda briefing. We have several presentations this tomorrow night. Consent agenda. C1 is approval of the minutes. C2 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a contract with CIP Planner Corporation, San Ramon, California for capital project management software. Oh, I'm sorry. I do have to do a roll call, Madam Clerk. Okay. Mr. Waddell, you here? Mr. Barnett, are you here? Mayor Pro Tem, are you here? Present. Mr. Anderson, are you here?
Present.
Mr. Spears, are you here?
I am here.
And Mr. Ravenbark is chair of the Lower Cape Fear Water and Sewer Authority group, and he is not with us here this morning. So we go C1 is approval of the minutes. C2 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a contract with CIP Planner Corporation of San Ramon, California for capital project management software. C3 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with the Davy Tree Expert Company for tree removal services in the amount of $123,200. C4 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement to purchase 60 sets of firefighting coats and pants from NAFCO of Decatur, Alabama for $173,129 through the MPP Government Cooperative Buying Agreement. Public hearings. PH1 is a resolution authorizing the city of Wilmington to pay economic development incentives in the amount of $200,000, better known as Project Transit. The impact will be $40,000 per year for 5 years.
Excuse me,
Yes,
Mayor.
sir.
I don't remember this. Did this happen before I got here, or
Which one?
this P1, P2, and P3?
P1, P2, P3, as well as P4 are all economic development incentives that would involve the city of Wilmington, the county of New Hanover,
Right.
and the state of North Carolina.
Okay, and what I understand is that we're putting it in these programs so they can hire more people?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
There's
what-
a, go ahead.
And what are the programs? What is Pay Economics Development? Is it an organization?
It's a business, but I'm going to turn it over to our city manager for
Thanks.
further explanation.
These are proposals that
Okay.
are brought to us.
Oh, I got you. I got it now. I got it.
Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Mayor, we're going to ask that you open each one of these public hearings tomorrow night and then continue it 2 weeks. There has been some administrative issues associated with it. We'd just like to continue that for 2 weeks. Make sure we address those issues.
Okay, very good. All right, so PH2 is a resolution Okay. PH2 is a resolution authorizing the city of Wilmington to pay economic development incentives in the amount of $250,000 for Project Clear, and the impact will be $50,000 per year for 5 years. PH3 is a resolution authorizing the city of Wilmington to pay economic development incentives in the amount of $200,000 to Project Buckeye, and the impact will be $40,000 per year for 5 years. And then PH4 is a resolution authorizing the city of Wilmington to pay economic development incentives in the amount of $45,000 in Project Speed. Impact will be $9,000 per year for 5 years. Tony, just for further explanation, when we're going to open the public hearing, keep this thing open for 2 weeks, and then at that point in time, we'll have more definitive in regards to the actual job numbers?
We should have actual job numbers. I don't know that we'll have anything more than that, but we should have exacts on numbers.
Okay, very good. It's a good thing. Thank you. PH5 is an ordinance directing the housing inspector to vacate, close, and repair the dwelling at 420 Church Street as unfit for human habitation pursuant to Article 5, Chapter 16 of the City Code, and directing that a notice be placed thereon prohibiting its use or occupancy. PH6 is an ordinance directing the housing inspector to vacate, close, and repair the dwelling at 1112 North 6th Street as unfit for human habitation pursuant to Article 5, Chapter 16 of the City Code, and directing that a notice be placed thereon prohibiting its use or occupancy. And then PH7 is an ordinance directing the housing inspector to vacate, close, and repair or demolish a dwelling at 513 North Kerr Avenue as unfit for human habitation pursuant to Article 5, Chapter 16 of the City Code, and directing that a notice be placed thereon prohibiting its use or occupancy. Ordinances. 01 is an ordinance reducing the speed limit from 35 miles per hour to 25 miles per hour along SR 1374 Allendale Drive within the City of Wilmington's municipal boundaries. And then 02 is an ordinance appropriating $17,380.62 of revenue recovered through the North Carolina Hazmat RRT contract with North Carolina Emergency Management to the general fund. 03A is an ordinance making supplemental appropriations in the amount of $225,000 to the Encino Sports Complex project, better known as a soccer complex, from reimbursable funds to be received from the Cape Fear Youth Soccer Association Incorporated for the installation of athletic lighting. 03B is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a $225,000 reimbursement agreement with Cape Fear Youth Soccer Association Incorporated for a portion of the cost of Musco athletic lighting for the Encino Sports Complex. 04A is an ordinance making supplemental appropriations in the amount of $650,000 to the Oleander Drive Sidewalk Improvement Project from Worcester Street to Mimosa Place from the Transportation Bonds Contingency Bike/PED project funds. And then 04B is the resolution authorizing the award of a construction contract in the amount of $722,677.15 to Morgan Trucking and General Construction Incorporated for the Oleander Drive Sidewalk Improvements Project from Worcester Street to Mimosa Place. And then reports is RP1's Council's Appointments Committee for Boards and Commissions, and Councilmember Rivenbark will be giving us a report from that. That concludes this portion of the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This morning we have two items for you. The first item is a presentation from Joe Conway, our Chief Diversity and Equity Officer, who will be giving you an update on our strategic plan for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Joe?
Good morning, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, Council. Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day to you, too.
All right, nothing like throwing the new guy up front first. So let's just get started, shall we?
Yes, sir.
All right, so I understand that this particular report was already given to our executive management team, AKA our executive leadership team. And so I wanted to take you through it. Not sure what you have or have not received. I would ask that you definitely comment if you have seen a little bit of this before, and we can move on and we can get to questions should you have them. First is just a high-level overview. We're going to look at some quantitative and qualitative outputs from the actual survey that was conducted by Intellect as a part of the RTI, the Rise Together initiative. And then some of the questions we'll go over, but our main focus is going to be that third element under the third section there, which is key opportunity themes that we see by category. So we had over 452 respondents. That's just shy of 50% of participation from our employee staff, which is outstanding, I must say. And then we have some very specific comments, some open-ended comments that were allowed at the very end of the survey, which I think are the more telling points that you'll see. What I want to point out here is just some things to pay attention to. One of those things is going to be this category here where you got 4s and 5s. I mean, we're looking at data, that's always great stuff. That's where folks agree or strongly agree. The area that is always of opportunity is a strongly disagree or just simply disagree. But my focus are those that sit on the fence. They're kind of indifferent. They could go either way, or maybe they haven't seen what they expected to see, or maybe there's no influence to cause them to be on one side or the other. I have a tendency when I do surveys to take away a category and only keep it to 4. I make people choose to get off the fence. 3 is a fence, and people like sitting there when they don't know what to say. Choose is what I say. So if, as I conduct surveys in the future, you'll see that fence removed. So here's some of the main primary themes across these categories. Now, where you see a green star, I just want you to take special note. Those are things to really be proud of. Really, when you conduct a survey, you want something around the 85th percentile. You see that this is around 80, 81, 79% based on these two primary questions, still something to be proud of. This is one of our high areas, and then you'll see the polarities within the themes itself. So number one, obviously, opinions and feelings about the DEI initiative, that's normal, right? What are you expecting from this guy who's coming in on the block, the city's initiative? And then also just a polite, respectful workplace. This is indicative of Southeastern North Carolina, but really believe, because I've conducted more than just one of these surveys and more than just one organization. It really, really is indicative of our culture. We are very polite. We are very respectful. We understand boundaries, and we want people to feel like they've been treated well. Again, just a high-level overview. I'll let you review this at any time. I do not want to give you an eye test at this particular time. Two most favorable questions here. Now, where you see that octagon there and kind of the red there, those are areas where we need to slow down. There's a lot of caution there. Areas of opportunity is what I would call those. So you see 64% favorability. I believe city employees have equitable opportunities for advancement regardless of their sexual orientation. And then the second one, obviously, is 62%. I believe the city takes active measures to seek a diverse candidate pool when hiring. Things just to take of note is obviously confusion about what best candidate actually means. And how do we define that? Resistance to recruitment and hiring of diverse candidates. Now, keep in mind that this is kind of the feeling or the story that goes along with the data. So this is opinion-oriented. This is the qualitative stuff. And there's always going to be stories that go along with the data. That's something to remember. Data tells us one thing, but then there's actual lived experiences. And this is speaking to those lived experiences. Favorable and or lack of transparency in career development and advancement. As I've met with leaders and frontline staff, I will say that there are some challenges there. But overall, there's a good sense of pride in what folks do. A lot of servants' hearts out there. So again, while we see there's a challenge and an opportunity for improvement, even at the 60%, there's a lot to be proud of. Eye chart. Okay, I'll let you take special note. One thing I will call out here is a Q17. I'm aware of and understand the procedures for reporting incidents of discrimination and or bias in the workplace. You're going to see as I continue to go through the report, while you have close to 80% agree and or strongly agree that yes, my organization provides an avenue for this, you're going to see the lived experience on the back end not matched with what was actually put on the data. So there's a paradox going on here. So the lived experience does not speak to this as strongly. Again, the caution upside down triangle, tried to get it to match our yield signs. This is just where you see part of that dichotomy start to pop out. 82%, very favorable, right? I am aware of and understand the procedures of reporting incidents. That's what we were picking up on. But then the 61% challenges us. My department has policies and procedures that encourage respect for diversity and promote equity and inclusion. Not quite as strong as that 82%. 20%, 21% difference. What's happening? See, that's where we got to dig in just a little bit. So you see the fear of the DEI efforts. What's going to happen is the question mark. Inconsistent in how policies and practices, what we say and then what we do are not quite adding up. And then concerns about compensation and benefits. I believe that we actually heard from our own city manager where that is clearly being looked at and will be an area of focus. I expect for that particular concern to somewhat mitigate itself. And then inadequate transparency in promotion and hiring opportunities. It keeps popping up. What are my opportunities as a frontline staff member that if I want an advancement or even moving within my own department or across other departments and divisions? Only thing I'll call out here is notice how quickly we are getting more and more to that 50% in each one of these questions. That brings up we need to look at this, right? The little pentagon, the red pentagon. So favorable, I would like to learn more about what I can do to support a more inclusive work environment. 53% are on board. They're all excited, right? That also means that 47% are questioning or in that neutral zone, right? We got to get them off the fence. Polarities about the need for and or adequacy of DEI training. There is inconsistency across the corporation or across the organization. But I think that could be quickly remedied. We just got to get everybody on the same page and all operate with the same message. That's going to involve a lot of marketing and communication. So I've been meeting with my colleagues around that. It's going to take some time. And then optimism for potential impact of inclusive DEI training. That's the ultimate goal. You know, and then what's the optimal level? What's the right pace is another question that also needs to be answered. And does it look the same in each culture? I would dare say that the police department differs from the fire department, differs from the city manager's office. So you got to really adapt quickly to each environment, but each environment is, you know, ushering towards the same mark. Big one that pops out here for me is racial, religious, ethnic, sexual, and gender-based jokes or slurs are not tolerated in our workplace. Again, you're going to see a dichotomy pop up here. What we practice or what we know is right versus what we do will be a challenge. And it also depends on which department you're in. And then, of course, the two most favorable questions here, 78, 73%, these are things to be proud of, is that same question that I just went over. And then, of course, in my work group, our team employees appreciated others whose backgrounds, beliefs, and experiences are different from their own. I think this is important here to just note, as you see these call-outs, these themes, inadequate communication and listening across the organization, that seems to be a trend. And you know, again, these are lived experiences. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're true or false. These are just lived experiences. And then number two is concern that all perspectives and groups won't be included and heard. I hear that quite often. When you focus on one group, am I being left out? Now, I will tell you around the issue of equity, equity is very much about fairness, and equity is also about addressing the disparity. So who is presenting with the most pain or the opportunity for improvement? That's the group that you focus on. We've kind of been going after equality backwards. We just want to give everybody the same thing, but I have 4 boys. I do not treat them all 4 the same, even though they are under the same roof. They have unique characteristics, unique things that they drive towards. And for those of you that also have children, grandchildren, siblings, or you find yourself in the midst of a corporation, not everybody has the same needs. So you focus. You focus on the ones that need the attention, and you bring them up, and inadvertently, according to Alfredo Pareto, you actually achieve the very thing that you're after when you approach it with equity, which is equality. It's a reverse way of thinking, and it challenges us quite often. 3, anxieties about changes that are more inclusive in the workplace will require, here we go again, fear of the unknown. I just don't know what's going to happen. That's what they're saying. I just don't know. That's okay. That's human nature, and the lack of awareness that inclusion issues exist. Again, I would just call your attention to Q30 here. My supervisor is committed to and supports diversity, equity, and inclusion. That was really super encouraging for me to see, because I often have the question, as the leadership goes, so goes the corporation. Where I find most people often get frustrated, so this is obviously a green star. I mean, we're banging on all cylinders here. We got a little bit of improvement. But if the leadership, if the frontline staff is not at a point where they're all excited, they're really ready for it, where we will actually have a challenge is when the leadership resists that excitement. So this is a good category. And again, it has some opportunities. So doubts about leadership commitment, leadership department communication gaps, how is it trickling down the frontline staff once leadership gets informed? Culture norms hinder open dialogue. Got to be sensitive and careful about that as well. How do we talk about the very issues that we say we ought not to be talking about at work? Can you think of 2? Usually politics and religion come up, you know. And to be honest with you, the reason we're not, we ask that we don't talk about those things because we're not real good about talking about those things. So in order to create an environment where we can talk about such things and many, many others, we need to engage. Limited broad diversity, that's by age, religion, race, gender, et cetera, across leadership levels. Now I will say, and I dug into some of the data, very proud of our city manager's office. So here's my attaboy, or attagirl, or you insert the word. I find it, you know, we're right at 50%, 50-50 male, female. I love that, okay? Is there opportunities for the other demographics? Sure. But I still love the fact that somebody was quite intentional. And the way that I define inclusion is intentionality. Again, getting closer and closer to that 50% when you look at the overall. So this is all of it added up. We are right in the middle. So this is where I began to say at the very beginning that there's one thing going on in the data and the policies and how folks may feel about some of those things, and then the lived experiences. So as an organization, we're at the 58th% opportunity. And it's going to be important as we move forward to define those areas of opportunity. So I don't feel as though I need to read these to you, but you can see the messaging is a big part of this. What is our definition of what diversity is and or isn't? Equity and inclusion. That's got to be consistent messaging across the board, and as well as opposition and resistance. Those two things I actually will call out because we have to understand that not everybody's going to agree on what we're trying to agree on, and that's got to be okay. The thing that I will say in my experience is allow people to be themselves in your presence, in your space. And that goes with reason, of course. We have policies that we all must follow and abide by. But at the end of the day, I need to allow everyone to express themselves freely and openly in my space. Questions?
Any questions? Looks like we have some work to do.
We do, and I think it's going to be good work, sir.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Very
Yes,
good
sir.
report. Tony?
I want you to know that we didn't throw the new guy up there just for fresh meat. But he only gets to claim to be the new guy for about another week, and then he's a veteran. So, thank you, Mr.
Very
Mayor.
good. Thank you.
We have a presentation from Mr. Joy this morning regarding what I like to term as vagrancy statutes, but I'm sure he'll have a better term for it than that. Thanks, Joe.
Well, good morning, Mayor and Council, and I will tell you that I'm going to put all of this First Amendment law into a nutshell for you here in just a minute. I'm afraid I've been adding to that notebook in doing the research. I know that several members of the public here in Wilmington have contacted Council on a number of what I term public safety issues, and I would ask Council to adopt that term. I think it is the most appropriate term, as they really are a cadre of issues and they all go to public safety. Because of that, I was asked to give Council a briefing on what has been termed as vagrancy laws, but it goes far deeper than that. And before I get into the precise issues, if I can advance this slide correctly, I'm going to go ahead and steal my own thunder and tell Council the First Amendment is wrapped all around these type of issues, and you will see a quote from the Supreme Court of Kentucky, a very timely quote from back in 2017, that basically goes ahead and tells folks the First Amendment is designed to make us all at least a little bit, if not a lot of bit, uncomfortable. So this entire presentation is given with that quote in mind. So let's look at some of the public safety issues I see. I'm not going to address each and every one of these issues individually, but I am asking Council and the public in general to be aware that these are the issues that we're looking at. At the top of the list is what many folks in the public always term as soliciting or begging. Many times we have to interpret what folks in the public will call in about. Normally, it's not folks who have some sort of an animus or a dislike for someone who's down on their luck and needs some help. It's usually the conduct, not the speech, that's the real issue, but we in government often have to sort through that and help folks understand what really the issue is here. Of course, we have issues with folks who try to intimidate other folks. We have folks who tend to just hang about and occupy space, sometimes impeding traffic or pedestrian ingress and egress. Litter is always an issue. There's always sensitive areas that folks are very careful and protective over. All of those issues have a First Amendment component, and we have to be very careful as a local government in how we move forward, keeping the First Amendment in mind. And with that, let me draw your attention back to 2014 and 2015. In those years, the Supreme Court of the United States handed us two opinions that, while it took a while for folks to catch on at a national level, these are landmark cases that have changed how we view the First Amendment and how you have to regulate within the bounds of it. The first one, McCullen v. Coakley, I'm not going to get into the facts of it unless you ask those questions, but that stands for the idea that when local government goes to put in a safety regulation, they need to have some evidence. If you're burdening speech, you need to come with some evidence. You need to be able to show why what you chose to do makes sense and is an alternative that is really necessary. The other alternatives don't really work. The Supreme Court said that. The Fourth Circuit, which is our circuit, took that very seriously. And then the second case, which counsel has heard multiple times in other contexts as well, that is Reed v. Gilbert. And Reed v. Gilbert dealt with one key thing, and that is, can you regulate content-based speech? Can you say, because of what you said, as in, hey, will you give me money? The Supreme Court made it clear that if you have to hear the speech, if you have to read the sign to know whether it's regulated, that is content-based. Virtually no content-based regulation can withstand the scrutiny that the court puts it under. I have some examples up there. These are drawn from actual state statutes. These are drawn from actual ordinances in and around the state. And as you can see, any person who solicits any employment, business, or contributions, what the court asked is, why is it more dangerous to solicit for employment or business or contributions than it is to ask, hey, will you vote for me? Or, hey, how do I get to the Walmart from here? The Supreme Court made it clear, and here's the quote from Reed, that it is the rare case in which speech restriction can withstand strict scrutiny. The rule of thumb is, if you have to read it, or if you have to hear what they say to know that it's regulated, then that's going to have to meet strict scrutiny, which is a compelling governmental interest that is narrowly tailored. It has to be the least restrictive under strict scrutiny. Now, with me having said that, most likely folks in the public are thinking, well, hold on, we regulate speech. We have picketing ordinances, and we say that you can't do things at certain times. Well, how in the world do we do that? Well, here is another doctrine under the First Amendment, and that is the idea of if it's content neutral. And here is an individual, or here is an example, and you're going to hear more about this example. This is from Oklahoma City. No individual shall stand, sit, or stay for any purpose, we don't care why, on any portion of a median within a street if the speed limit is 40 miles an hour. And that's a paraphrase that I had to reduce some of the wordiness of the opinion, but in Oklahoma City they said, you know what, we're not going to regulate soliciting or begging. We don't care what you're saying. We just don't want you standing on medians on roads that have a high speed limit. That's what they said, that content neutral. So if something is content neutral, we call it a time, place, manner restriction. And there's 4 things that you have to check the box as a local government in order for your regulation to be upheld by the courts. 1, not content-based. That's easy, check. It has to be a significant government interest. The case law has made it clear public safety is a significant government interest. Easy check. Next to are where the problems come in. It has to be I have up here reasonably tailored. So you know, the courts use the term narrowly tailored, but they use it differently than in strict scrutiny. In strict scrutiny, narrowly tailored means it has to be the least restrictive possible. In intermediate scrutiny, it just has to be a reasonable regulation that doesn't overburden speech. So it's really a reasonable tailoring. And you also have to leave open ample alternatives. Those are the stumbling blocks, the things you have to be very careful of. And I have two cases up there. I put the citations in case the media wants to look it up or in case the public wants to look it up and read these cases. I find them incredibly interesting. Reynolds v. Middleton is a Fourth Circuit case that was actually handed down while Reed v. Gilbert was before the Supreme Court. In that case, the Fourth Circuit just assumed that it was content neutral. After Reed, it would have been considered content-based, just so you know that. But in Reynolds v. Middleton, the Fourth Circuit actually said, hold on, not only do you have to have evidence to show that this is needed and it's a good alternative, you've got to show that you've tried some other methods and that they just haven't worked. That's a very powerful case that only applies in the Fourth Circuit. The next case is a Tenth Circuit case. I normally try to stay in our circuit that applies here in North Carolina, but in these cases, sometimes you have to look abroad, and McCraw v. Oklahoma City is the case that actually considered that content neutral, you can't stand, sit, or lie on the medians if it's 40 miles an hour or more. In that case, the Tenth Circuit struck it down, and they actually referenced Reynolds v. Middleton. So let's try to put this in a nutshell. To meet reasonable, tailored, and notice, this is the government's burden. We have to show that we did this right. The burden's not on the plaintiff who's saying, hey, your ordinance is unconstitutional. Burden's on us. We have to show that alternative measures that burden substantially less speech would fail. As in, there's not another way you can do this that doesn't get to just as much speech as what you're doing. We also have to show, and this is in the Fourth Circuit, that we tried other methods. It is definitely a tall burden. It can be met in certain circumstances, but you have to do your homework. You have to have the empirical evidence. In the McCraw case, they actually said, well, we don't really have any traffic studies that talk about this, and they pointed out that while it said medians, it didn't get into the width of the median. And there are some medians apparently in Oklahoma City, I've never been there, that are 50, 60 feet wide, have benches on them, and have walking paths on them. And the court pointed out that that just doesn't work. You did a good job, but not good enough, is what the court said in McCraw. Also in Ample Alternatives, I'm going to give a quote from the McCraw case. It said, just as in real estate, location matters in some constitutional questions. In McCraw, the sidewalks were still open, parks in those areas were still open, but the court said medians in this case are very special. They really do make a difference in folks trying to get out their speech. So they wanted to see some evidence. They didn't say that you could never do it right. They just said that there wasn't any evidence that this particular median caused a substantial enough safety issue to justify that alternative that Oklahoma City used. And I will tell you, Oklahoma City changed through the process of that case. They amended their ordinance a couple times, and the court noted that they just didn't have enough evidence to base some of those changes on. So, if we have to try other means, what other means are out there? What is our existing law? What do we have on the books right now? Well, we've got a lot of things. We have city ordinances already in place. The state already has statutes in place that go to, here's a list. I'm not going to belabor everything, but I do want folks to realize that aggressive soliciting or aggressive panhandling, which the way it's defined in our code is so close to a common law robbery that is one that I do believe would meet even the strict scrutiny. So we do have aggressive panhandling ordinances. We do tell folks that you can't dump or litter in public areas. In our parks, we do say that there's no trespassing after hours. You can't camp or sleep or litter in our parks. We also have impeding traffic, impeding the sidewalk ordinances and statutes on the books. North Carolina has disorderly conduct in a public building, intoxicated and disruptive. What I have counseled our officers and I know the chief is very good on this, is don't just jump to the idea of, oh, that's a panhandling ordinance. We have to have something that says panhandling. What conduct, not speech, but conduct, what is it that's really objectionable? And let's regulate that. So we do have ordinances and laws on the books that I think can be very effective. I would be remiss if I didn't put this out there for the public and remind folks, our police department certainly has a great amount that we ask of them day in, day out. We certainly fight against gangs. We certainly want to focus on the serious crimes such as homicide and burglary and those crimes of violence. So there is a prioritization that council and the police department and the city manager have to take into account when dealing with public safety. So what is my recommendation? My recommendation is, one, our panhandling ordinance is a long one, and it does need to be revised. We had planned as staff, we had the land development code, which was already underway as a revision when I came to the city. We worked hard, we got that revised last year, and this year we are going through some troubleshooting. There will be some amendments that will come to council. The plan has been to look at the rest of our city code in 2023. I would recommend that we stick to that plan and that we will bring you not only an entire code update, but specifically a panhandling update that we will do our dead level best to be sure it's constitutional as much as the cases can give us that guidance. I would say that First Amendment law is one of the most difficult areas. You change one small fact and you can get a completely different result from the courts. But I would say we stick to the course and we bring that to council in 2023. We should certainly avoid any content-based regulation. We also need to utilize our existing laws, and between now and then, we need to work as an organization to gather data, gather what will be evidence to support whatever council might choose to do. And certainly, we would bring to council drafts that we believe the evidence supports those ordinances and laws to deal with it. Whether it is focusing on certain medians, I will tell you that in the McCraw case, I was struck that had Oklahoma City focused on medians that are 18 inches or less in width, I think simply the logic and rationale of saying if you're that close to moving vehicles, that is a substantial safety risk. I think that that might very well have carried the day for Oklahoma City. I would recommend that, frankly, we have to do our homework. We need to gather the evidence, have the traffic studies. We need to look at where are we getting the calls, not necessarily about what people are saying, but where are people standing, and are they in traffic, and are they impeding? That's what the courts are looking for, and that is coming straight out of the Supreme Court in the McCullen case, which, in case you look it up, that actually was an abortion protesting case, but it got into buffer areas and buffer zones and public safety, and the court made it very, very clear they want some evidence of why this is safety and why it has to be a 35-foot buffer instead of a much smaller buffer. Remember, they're looking for us to have truly looked at, are there alternatives that do not burden speech as much? So, with all of that said and the recommendation before you, I'm opening up for any questions or any discussion that council may have. And if you notice, that is a quote out of McCullen. It was out of Massachusetts, and that is from Chief Justice Roberts himself. I think that's a very telling theme of where we need to be.
Thank you very much. I think Mr. Waddell has a question.
This is great, great update, and appreciate it, Mr. Joy. Just basically, your recommendation is between now and the 2023 Plan Code update for council to direct some sort of traffic study for a public safety ordinance if we were going to include one in the 2023 code update.
Council member, if council wants to direct staff, they certainly can. I believe that the chief and the manager are already all on the same page, and we intend to look at this and to focus on our intersections that, whether by accident results or by the amount of folks we have in the medians, we intend to look at them and see exactly what do we need to do to enhance that public safety. But don't let me speak for the manager.
It's already in the plan. Great.
Essentially, yes. We hear council by the questions you ask us, and clearly public safety is one of your top priorities.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mr. Anderson?
Well, John, you know, I've been beating on you for something about the medians for a while, so no secret there from me. I mean, I just think they're totally different than the side of the road. That's my opinion. And a lot of citizens feel the same way. They approach intersections differently, have to reduce speed because they're worried, you know, they're trying to make a left turn light and there's someone there. It creates anxiety when they're driving. If you need any proof, I've been taking pictures for the last couple of weeks of people out in the road off the median to collect the money and the stoplight's green and they can't move. That's impeding traffic. I hope we don't have to wait for someone to get killed or hurt badly. I mean, if that's the kind of proof we need, that's unfortunate because I think it's, as you mentioned, the width or what have you, these things were not designed for pedestrians or people to be on them. They're crowned typically for water runoff, et cetera. I hope we can craft something involved with the medians, and it has zero to do with speech. It has all to do with public safety impeding traffic. So anything we can do to move that along, and I'd appreciate it. Thanks.
Certainly.
Are there any other questions? Mr. Burnett?
We have the law already on the books, right? Are we arresting people or anything, or do you know?
What I will say, and Councilmember, I'm sure that your question is coming from that change that council had to do in reaction to the bill SB 300 from the legislature that decriminalized a lot of the city ordinances. We had to go back and pick out the ones. We kept the criminal enforcement mechanism for that list that I showed you that were city ordinances. We needed to do that. Identification becomes an issue. But in the conversations I've had with the chief, arrest is the last alternative, the last resort. And sometimes, frankly, council members, sometimes folks bring it on themselves when police approach them and just ask them nicely, hey, this is a dangerous area, or hey, this is a park, you can't be sleeping in it or something. Frankly, if the folks are reasonable and compliant, that's not something that officers arrest about. It's usually the folks who become aggressive or difficult. And I will tell you, on aggressive panhandling, that is so close to a common law robbery that that would be appropriate for arrest anytime that an officer has verified it, that yes, we have the evidence to prove that. And that is one portion of our panhandling ordinance that we absolutely enforce. There are parts of our panhandling ordinance, quite frankly, that the chief, he didn't need my advice before I gave it to him, but I gave it to him anyway, which is, you know, it very likely is unconstitutional to tell folks they can't solicit or panhandle after dark. And that's in our code. It's a leftover from decades ago. You'll find that in cities all over the nation where there's still language there that is definitely unconstitutional, but it's not being enforced. And that's part of the cleanup of our city code. Every few decades, the city code needs just an overhaul. And that's exactly what we've been working on. We started with the LDC, and we will move to the general code. And you'll see a lot of that work going on this year in preparation for next year when we plan to bring that to council in a comprehensive way.
Okay, thank you.
Could you,
Hey, John.
Mr. Spears?
John, I want us to be careful about contrasting handling and the involvement or the load that WPD has to handle with the gang issue. That could be seen somewhat as insensitive. We have other crimes in our community other than gangs, and you know, but I just felt a certain type of way when I heard you say that. So I want us to be careful how we say those things.
Certainly, council member, that absolutely wasn't my intent. And whether violence takes place that's gang related or not gang related, violence is always going to be a top priority for any police department, especially ours.
Thank you.
Would you just define aggressive panhandling?
It's one where someone approaches another person in an aggressive or intimidating fashion. That's actually in our ordinance. It is a totality of the circumstances. Obviously, if you threaten someone, as in, give me money now or else, that's what makes it a common law robbery. If you don't actually verbalize that, if you get very close, if they're trying to move away, if they say, stay away, and you keep coming at them, that's where it crosses the line into aggressive panhandling. I will tell you, council member or Mayor Pro Tem, it's a very small little sliver of activity that is aggressive panhandling, but not common law robbery. And it's very easy for folks to solicit or panhandle and it not be aggressive. You know, simply asking someone for a donation is not aggressive panhandling.
Okay, so they, just as an example, because I see this often, they approach someone, generally tourist or whatever, but they approach an individual and ask, do you have any change? Will you give some money to whatever? And the person says no and keeps walking, and then they are bombarded with very loud obscenities. It's too bad.
If you couple the bombardment of very loud obscenities with following, getting very close, refusing to just let the matter end and let the tourist walk on off, then that very easily could cross the line into aggressive panhandling.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Anderson. No, go ahead.
What about just simply, I mean, downtown is really the only place that run into this. Well, there's one other one comes to mind, but on car, but we don't have the foot traffic on cars we have downtown. So when is it just completely blocking a sidewalk or more or less blocking it? Maybe you have to go around a parking meter or, you know, where they're blocking the usable area of the sidewalk and it won't yield. What is that? Just tough beans?
That is impeding pedestrian traffic. It's a Class 3 misdemeanor in our city code. We've used that a number of times. And the very transient nature of that, often when a police officer is seen walking towards it, that group just kind of dissipates and moves on. Sometimes if another pedestrian will say, hey folks, I just need to get through here, you'll see folks break up. That's one of my pet peeves. A lot of folks do it unintentionally. I often say, why do you stop and have a group to talk right at the entrance of something or right at the exit of something? But yes, we do use that, and it is in our city code. You are not allowed to impede the pedestrian movement on a sidewalk. Now, if there's no one coming, if it's just an open area of sidewalk and 2 or 3 people are standing there talking and it's not impeding anyone, then that's not actually a violation. And what I have not seen officers do is arrest people for that. I have seen officers often say, hey, please keep the way clear.
So is it impossible to loiter on a sidewalk, public sidewalk?
Well, loitering is something that has been struck down across the nation. If it's just being present in a public place, then that's not something that has been found to be constitutional. We do have loitering for the purpose of drug activity. It's a hard, there's several elements to it. It's hard to make as a police officer, but when you couple the loitering or the being present with some other activity that is objectionable, that's when it's something that can be constitutionally regulated.
But in this case, somebody's panhandling on the sidewalk and they eat up a third, a half of the sidewalk and they sit in that spot every day, all week, that's fine.
Loitering will not stand, but if they're impeding, if it's a busy time and pedestrians are getting pushed out into the main travel portion because that person is just laying there in the way, then that's impeding the sidewalk.
Okay. Thank you, John.
Certainly.
Is there a city ordinance or state statute in regards to defrauding the public? And the reason for that question is I think there's a lot of folks out there who need legitimate help. and are asking for it. And I think we have, as a city and the county, have a lot of programs to help folks that need it. I think there's some folks who are taking advantage of that, who are saying that they need help when in reality they do not. So is there city ordinance or state statute that provides for defrauding the public?
Councilmember, yes, there is. It has big teeth. It's hard to get all of the elements together. It's called obtaining property through false pretenses, and it is a felony. And essentially, if you pose as a charity and the charity is completely false and you trick people into donating to the charity and you just pocket those funds, that's absolutely a felony, obtaining property through false pretenses.
How about if you're an individual?
Certainly it's possible. If the way you obtain that money, I'm just going to use money as an example, is through a complete knowing and intentional lie, then that absolutely can be the basis for obtaining property through false pretenses. And you do see that in panhandling situations from time to time.
But is that a city ordinance or is it state?
That's a state statute. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other
Yeah, one
questions?
last
Mr.
thing.
Barnett.
I oftentimes see like ladies, especially on like Oleander and Independence, right on that median. That it just seems dangerous to me, really dangerous. What should we do? Should we? I mean, and when they walk to your car, that's not aggressive? That's just, how do you define that?
If the light turns green and they're in the traveled portion, then they're impeding traffic, and that is a state statute, and it can be enforced. It's very work intensive for police, so
Right.
hot spots are exactly where they would look to for that. And Councilmember, I've seen the exact same thing at that location. I know exactly
Yeah.
what you're talking about.
Yeah, and usually they don't come, like when the light is green, they leave you alone, kind of like, but when it's red, well, they don't walk to the car, they just walk down in front of you, like, kind of like, make you feel guilty or something. You know. But anyway, thank you for the report. I appreciate it.
Any other questions? Mr. Joy, thank you very much. To me, the one disappointing thing is we're not going to really be able to deal with this until 2023. You're going to make efforts to get there, but it sounds like we're not going to really make any substantive changes until, a year and a half from now.
Mayor Pro Tem, we will need to do some work. We'll need to have those studies. We'll need to be able to have empirical evidence based on the case law. Frankly, the more evidence we have, the longer period of time we have to gather that evidence, the stronger the regulation will be, the less likely it will be to be overturned by the courts. But we don't want paralysis by analysis, as they say. We definitely want to bring this back to you as early in 2023 as we can.
I have one more
Okay,
follow-up.
I think the one other thing is, under the existing laws that are there, which some are quite good, and I understand, the police have more important things perhaps to be dealing with, but some of these, we see some of these instances that linger on and are not dealt with, like leaving, leaving all of their unattended belongings, such as they may be, and that not being dealt with over time. And that could be just because we have, limited staff and limited time and opportunity to deal with that. I don't know. Mr. Waddell?
So to members of the public, so since we do have a year and a half before we see any actual ordinances being amended or changed in regards to public safety in this discussion, if members of the public see somebody that they suspect of defrauding the public, which is a felony, or if they are approached in an aggressive manner, aggressive panhandling, any of these list of items that are currently on the books and illegal, they should call law enforcement, correct?
911.
Yep,
Absolutely, especially in the case of aggressive panhandling.
absolutely.
Great, thank you, sir. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Manager?
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, we're going to ask that you go into closed session. A motion has been placed before you for reading to be able to go into that closed session, please.
All right, thank you. Is there a motion to enter into a closed session pursuant to the provisions of GS 143-318.11, A3, A4, and A6 in order for City Council to: Number 1, discuss matters relating to the location or expansion of industries or other businesses, including potential economic development initiatives. And number 2, consider the qualifications, competence, fitness, performance, and conditions of employment of public officers and employees. And number 3, consult and provide instruction to the city attorney regarding potential legal claims.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Waddell and a second by Mr. Anderson. The closed session will be held here in these council chambers in consideration of the pandemic. I must now ask all members of the public and non-essential city staff to exit council chambers. At the end of this closed session, council will reopen its public session and invite anyone that wishes to return to council chambers before any further business is conducted, and the meeting is adjourned.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, I believe you'll need a roll call on that.
For the vote.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Mr. Spears, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Barnett? Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Waddell? He's aye, and I am also aye, so that passes unanimously. We'll now stand in closed session.
Okay. We're back from closed session. I will read a statement for the public. Council instructed staff regarding the city's negotiating position concerning the possible acquisition of real property. Council considered the qualifications, competence, fitness, performance, and conditions of employment of public officers or employees. Council provided instruction and guidance to the city attorney regarding potential legal matters, and no other action was taken other than those. So with that, thank you for taking interest in your government. We stand adjourned.